Hello, in this quick video I'm going to demonstrate exactly how Stefan Molyneux has provided statements of agreement with anti-Semites. In Stefan's video, The War on White People, a caller calls in and asks him about his thoughts on the war on white people, what it is, why it's happening, and who's producing it. And Stefan gives kind of a beat around the bush answer, but I'm going to use a couple quotes to show exactly what the caller was saying and kind of what he was implying by it and what he was trying to lead Stefan to say, and then also show some of Stefan's answers.
I mean, I'm not talking about, when I talk about white people, I'm not talking about like George Bush or Bill Clinton, because there's not a war on for them. I'm talking about the average, everyday, round the folk, white person. I think there is. I think it has to do with I don't even know if it's a Zionist-controlled media or the communist, socialist left, but I think they want to break up the family.
So the caller starts off by kind of laying out what he sees as this leftist, socialist, communist, Zionist conspiracy to destroy the family. And let's see what Stefan has to say about this.
And so they've needed to find some sort of substitute. And they've not been willing to engage in the war of ideas. Like even after conservative has been slandered repeatedly and it seems almost infinitely for the past 30 or 40 years, and certainly since McCarthy, that conservatism has been so slandered, but still twice the number of Americans identify as conservative as liberal. So they've really been unable to win the war of ideas, and so they're basically just using the war of moving human bodies now. I mean, it's not a very noble way to get your way, but that's just the way it is. So I think that the war on the family, of course, as well. I mean, it's just another way to create a Democrat voting bloc. I mean, single women and single moms in particular overwhelmingly vote for the Democrats. So they have every incentive to split families, and they have every incentive to create conditions in which single motherhood flourishes. And so, yeah, this attack upon the family and this relentless immigration that does not give time for assimilation is, it seems to me, it's just pretty much a massive political ply on the part of the Democrats to bypass the need for a debate on the ideas.
So, Stefan doesn't think that this isn't happening. He just simply thinks that it's happening for a different reason. That it's not an all-out war out of animosity or hate, but it's out of a strategic need to dismantle the nuclear family so that people will start voting Democrat more. And also, we need to start bringing in more immigrants because immigrants vote left. Yeah, so he's not denying the points that this anti-Semite is saying. He's just simply re-explaining it and reformulating the concern into a framework or a narrative that is a little bit more palpable to, decent human beings.
Yeah, I don't think it's a war against white people and white males. I mean, let's be honest about it. It's mostly white males. But I think it's just the necessary byproduct of what is needed by the Democrats to gain and maintain political power. I'm sorry?
Where do you think it comes from, though? Is it a communist movement? Is it a Zionist movement? Because it seems very messed up. Yeah, I think they've infiltrated. For sure. So they've infiltrated somewhere, sometime.
So here's where Stefan really finds himself in a little bit of a pickle, because he seems to really want to agree with this caller, but he can't just outwardly say, the Jews are communists or the communists are Jews. Rather, what he has to do is he has to find a way of shoehorning in an anti-Zionist or an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory under the guise of anti-Zionism into a more palpable narrative. So let's see how unconvincing he can be.
So that's definitely been the case. I mean, the degree to which Jews are associated with communism, was quite a lot of the founders, of course, the major theoreticians and so on. But, they all lost to Stalin, and then there was a purge against the Jews in the Communist Party in the 30s. So, but the degree to which it's driven by Judaism is, depends which time slice of history you're looking at. You'll find more or fewer.
So Stefan thinks that the Jewish communists are actually infiltrating Western institutions to undermine the family and to bring up new justifications for immigration in an attempt to, I don't know, get the Democrats voted, I guess. I don't quite understand what Stefan is trying to say. It's really roundabout and just wholly unconvincing. In this entire video, you see that Stefan is being kind of handheld, question by question, by the caller. And so let's see where the caller brings it, and let's watch Stefan kind of flounder again.
I mean, it must be the greatest power ever, or they're not human. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
Like either David Icke's right,
definitely human, which is what makes them so tricky. They're cyborgs.
Yeah.
Cylons. But no.
That was great, Stefan. I really like watching you cut off an anti-Semite, like exposing himself as a horrible bigot, by trying to make it into a joke so that you can continue to have this conversation and play to this anti-Semitic bigoted base that you've started to establish in the extreme far right. Yeah, just absolutely wonderful. So let's see where this keeps going.
And so these two socialistic, if not communistic, infections in Western Europe, government schools and fiat currency central banking, that was fucking it. I mean, that was it. That beat the plowshares into swords. And we've really been reeling from the effects of that ever since.
So later in the video, Stefan seems to just drop the narrative that he started to spin earlier on, where it's the Democrats that are causing all of this, the effects that feel like the war on whites, I guess. I don't know. And he starts talking about World War One. And more to the point, he talks about the fact that before World War One, he believes that there was this great pride and yes-saying, triumphant yes-saying in European culture, and that all of the triumphant advances in Western culture were brought to a halt during World War One. World War One was brought about through the establishment of fiat currency and the state takeover of the education system. So the caller at this point asks, who is causing this? And let's see how this all plays out.
Do you think that they? I mean, who's they?
Who, Stefan? Who did it?
I mean, that's what I'm trying to think of. It's obviously a leftist communist infiltration. I mean, it's blatantly obvious. But I don't know, where it comes from. But it's just, I don't like where it's going, though. It seems very, very collectivist, very statist. It's a weird thing. I can't even explain it.
Well, as I've made this case before, the they is
the rulers.
No, it's the priestly class who transitioned to the intellectual class. They saw that the ship of God was listing and going down, and they all jumped ship to go to universities and politics and the state. And they took their considerable rhetorical skills, they detached them from their dying God, and they fastened them onto the jugular of the New World. And they continued their black wizardry of language parasitism, and were willing to drive people to war and willing to propagandize people to self-slaughter It is the oldest enemy of mankind, I believe, is the sophists. The people who can make a worse argument appear the better by emotional manipulation rather than reason and evidence.
So, if Stefan thinks that it's the priestly class that is causing all of these changes that specifically hinder the progress of white males, the question is, who are the priestly class? Because I don't really buy that he thinks that it's the sophists. Because, the sophists aren't really a class of people. It's just a title that you give someone who can't make good arguments. Like, for example, I could say that Stefan Molyneux is a sophist because he can't make a single, simple, easy to follow argument that uses strong evidence and argumentation. So, to get our answer, I'm going to look at Friedrich Nietzsche's first treatise on the genealogy of morality, because Stefan Molyneux's response is clearly informed by this first treatise. And you can watch the rest of the video to kind of see the Nietzschean undertones in Molyneux's arguments. That being said, they read like a sophomoric racist's interpretation of Friedrich Nietzsche. But still, Nietzschean nonetheless. So, the quote that will give us the answer goes as follows. And twisted, there we go. So, the truly great haters in the history of the world have always been priests, also the most ingenious haters. Of all that has been done on earth against the noble, the mighty, the lords, the power holders, nothing is worthy of mention in comparison with that which the Jews have done against them. The Jews, the priestly people, who in the end were only able to obtain satisfaction from their enemies and conquerors through a radical revaluation of their values, that is, through an act of spiritual revenge. In connection with the enormous and immeasurably doom-laden initiative provided by the Jew with this most fundamental of all declarations of war, I can call attention to the proposition which I arrived at on another occasion, namely that with the Jews the slave revolt in morality begins. That slave revolt which has a 2,000-year history behind it, and which has only moved out of sight today because it has been victorious. That being said, I don't really think that Nietzsche hates the Jews and doesn't even really think that the Jews are necessarily the only members of the priestly class. Rather, he believed that both the nobility and the priestly classes hindered the means of actualizing the true potentiality of man. Yeah, I'm not really going to get into it, but that's basically it. However, the first treatise on the genealogy of morality has been taken up by a number of right-wing groups, most notably the Nazis, as a justification of anti-Semitism and racism. An uncritical and selective reading of the first treatise on the genealogy of morality can certainly give someone the impression of a Nietzschean hierarchy of man. So, given the fact that Nietzsche wasn't trying to say that the Jews are somehow the enemy of all man, and the fact that Nietzsche has been interpreted by some people falsely as saying this, you would think that in a conversation with someone who is clearly anti-Semitic, if you aren't an anti-Semite yourself, you would, not use Nietzschean terminology uncritically and without the proper contextualization and explanation needed to avoid these confusions. But of course, that's not what Stefan Molyneux did. So what I really think is he's giving kind of a wink and nod agreement to this anti-Semite and other anti-Semites like him. And, if he's not, then, he must be kind of dumb.